The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. The F&M Schaefer Brewing Company raises a cold glass of Schaefer beer in your honor, and Lucky Strike's blowing smoke rings at you from the studios of Comfortably Zoned Radio. And it's time once again for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I'm your host, Peter Trunk. My co-host, Ron Rabinovitz, is on assignment, and once again, one of my favorite guests on the show, Big Bill Hall. Big Bill Hall, how are you?
I am great, my friend. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well, and in case our listeners don't know, that moniker was given to you by one Carl Erskine.
So I wear it proudly, yeah.
There you go.
That's right.
I'm sure you do.
That's
tonight
right.
We're going to keep it in Brooklyn. We're going to keep the show in Brooklyn tonight. We're going to talk about number one in our hearts and on his uniform shirt, Captain, my captain. Take it away, Bill.
Pee Wee Reese. We are talking Pee Wee, and in the Brooklyn Dodger pages, I co-administer on Facebook, Brooklyn Dodgers, the Boys of Summer, and Brooklyn Dodgers Nostalgia Society. This year we've had fun with a whole lot of player spotlight weeks. And one of them, Carl Furillo Week, just spilled over into Carl Furillo Month, which I thought was appropriate. But this time, when I contemplated, somebody suggested a Pee Wee Reese Week, I just started scanning the photo archives, the other internet archives, and I said, nope, not Pee Wee Reese Week. December will be Pee Wee Reese Month. And we're only 5 days into it, and I've barely scratched the surface of the material I've got. Other members of the group, including you, are contributing photos and memories, and I think it is very clear that the affection then and now for Mr. Harold Reese is amazing, but yet not surprising to me whatsoever.
Not surprising at all. Pee Wee was one hell of a Dodger. A lot of people thought that he was the heart and soul of the Boys of Summer, and they're not too far off in their assumption, right? Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about Pee Wee?
Okay, well, how about starting off with the fact that he was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and a lot of people assume that because at his full growth, he only reached 5'9", and he was kind of boyish and baby-faced, well into his 30s, that they think that that's where the nickname Pee Wee came from. Not correct. In 1932, he actually won a marbles tournament, although some sources say he was only runner-up. But in any way, he was quite a crack marbles shooter, and the Pee Wee marble was his favorite. And so that's when the nickname was hung on him, and it stuck with him all through his life. Although, frankly, he was a little guy, too. I mean, did you know that he only played 5 games of baseball his senior year in high school? At the time he graduated, he was only 5'4", 120 pounds.
Wow.
Even when he went to his first spring training with the Dodgers in 1940, in his own words, I weighed all of 155 pounds soaking wet.
Wow. And
looking like I was 16. So talk about an improbable success story, but indeed a success story. You know, Leo DeRocher, of course, was player-manager and the incumbent Dodger shortstop when Pee Wee arrived as a 21-year-old rookie in 1940. But Leo's ego was huge, I think you'd agree, but it wasn't so huge that he was going to keep playing what he considered to be an over-the-hill shortstop, namely DeRocher, when he had this kid bursting with all kinds of talent ready to take over for him. And so Pee Wee played 84 games that summer, and he would have played more if he hadn't suffered a bad beating, which kept him out of action for months and forced DeRocher back into the lineup temporarily. But he was established right then and there as a regular Dodger shortstop, and except for World War II, he did not really yield his regular position until the final season in Brooklyn, 1957, when he was 38 years old and slowing down enough that Walter Alston had him playing a lot of games at third base.
And we must remember that these are the days, these are very heady days for the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Oh, yeah.
In 1940, the Dodgers were no longer considered to be the Daffiness Boys, no longer considered to be the jokes of the National League, no longer considered to be the walkover people that they were in years gone by. A guy named Larry McPhail came on the scene and righted the ship, if you will. He did an about face for the Dodger faithful, and it is to be remembered as a very heady time in Brooklyn.
Oh, yes.
The Dodgers were a viable, not only a viable ball club, but a contender. And a team that boasted stars, a team that had real ball players on their roster. Go ahead. I just wanted to interject
that is all totally true, but ironically, I think that message hadn't gotten through yet to Pee Wee, who was, in 1938, a 19-year-old shortstop starting for Louisville in the American Association, his hometown team in the very top minor league, the American Association, and he played with them as well. And I'm sure you probably know the fact that Louisville was not affiliated with the Dodgers, that in fact they were a farm club of none other than the Boston Red Sox. But Peter, why don't you share with the folks why Pee Wee ended up playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers instead of taking the shortstop job in Boston?
Well, there was a guy named Joe Cronin.
Yeah.
And Joe Cronin in Boston. And Joe Cronin, who wound up to be a Hall of Famer himself, was the aging shortstop for the Boston Red Sox. And he did not want to give his place up in the lineup. He didn't want to yield to a youngster, Reese or anyone else for that matter. And, Reese had no future really in Boston because of Joe Cronin, because of Joe Cronin's hubris, and as opposed to Leo DeRocher, who saw the same thing and stepped aside because he knew that he was the aging shortstop who had lost 2 or 3 steps, and that Reese could be the answer for him at that keystone position.
Which helps to prove why Leo DeRocher was a more successful manager than Joe Cronin.
Absolutely.
Although, getting back to the point you were talking about, how the Brooklyn Dodgers of 1940 were really an up-and-coming team and, in fact, turned out only to be 1 year away from the pennant, I'm thinking that news really hadn't penetrated to young Pee Wee, because I read a quote that years later, that when he heard that his contract had been sold to Brooklyn, his first thought was, oh, no, Brooklyn, the place where they have 3 men on third base and outfielders are getting hit on the head with fly balls? I don't want to go to Brooklyn. And he quickly learned that, the Daffiness Boys were history, and that he was joining an amazing major league club. And one thing, I mentioned the 41 pennant, and Pee Wee I really see as the true link between that first great modern Brooklyn club and then the Boys of Summer. Pete Reiser was sort of hanging around still in 47, but it was only Pee Wee who was there all the way from 41 through 56 on every one of those clubs that faced off against the Yankees.
Yep. Yes, he was.
And quite a guy, and, and put up a Hall of Fame career despite the fact that, like so many of the young men his age, He gave up 4 prime seasons when he was 24, 25, 26 to willingly serve in the United States Navy.
Yeah.
And he did his duty, and he came back home and without complaint resumed his career, and was really the cog on all of those teams. You know, nowadays people talk so much about black ink as being essential to a player's Hall of Fame case. You know, black ink indicating in their career record that they led or tied the league. Right. And you don't see a lot of black ink in Pee Wee's numbers. I mean, 1949, he led the league in runs scored. 1947, he led the league in walks, but as he himself said, nobody remembers the walks. 52, he tied for the lead in stolen bases. And the career batting average of 269, even for a shortstop, doesn't leap out and say, wow, or 126 career home runs. But
those were
steady
different times,
play.
though, Bill. Those were different times where shortstops were not like the Garcia Parras and the A-Rods. They weren't hitting 35 home runs, driving in 100 runs.
No.
They were the guys with 2 or 3 homers, with about 40 RBIs. They would get on base. They would play a great defense for you. Getting back to Pee Wee, I just want to jump back, and then we'll jump forward again. I want to jump back to when Pee Wee led the National League in walks. You said in 1947?
Yeah, with 104.
After he retired, very strange quote. One of the quotes Pee Wee's quoted as saying that if he had his major league career to do over again, what are some of the things that you would have done differently? And he thought for a minute, and he said, I would have swung more.
Yeah, because nobody remembered all the walks.
Right, nobody remembered the walks, just like you said 4 minutes ago. And that, to me, is mind-boggling, because here's a guy who got on base. I mean, 104 walks is nothing to sneeze at. You're getting on base for the rest of the guys in the lineup. Why would he be saying, "Oh, you know, if I had to do over again, I would have swung more"? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm just guessing that was kind of tongue in cheek. You know, that maybe he wasn't really serious about it, but
perhaps.
You know. We weren't there, so we can't know for sure.
No.
But you know, it is an interesting comment.
It is interesting to say the least.
Yep. Gosh, where do we get back to Pee Wee? How about coming home from the war? We talked about.
I'm sorry, I keep throwing you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No,
you have something
I love
planned out, and I keep throwing you off, but. These are all interesting tidbits to me.
Oh, yeah. All the digressions are interesting. Okay. Believe me. No complaints on this score, my friend. You know, one of the great moments in baseball history was unfolding as Pee Wee was playing out his last days in the Navy. And he, you know, talked about it in later years quite vividly. He's on board ship. And one of his shipmates come to him and says, "Hey, Pee Wee, did you hear that the Dodgers signed a colored guy?" Because back then that was not a pejorative term. That was an acceptable term. You know, the colored or Negro was the common usage. Black and African American had not yet come into general usage. And he said, "Oh, no, I hadn't." And then he said, "What position does he play?" "Shortstop." And Pee Wee thought, well, heck, just my luck, because indeed, you know, Jackie Robinson, the great four-sport star at UCLA, that summer of 45, he was already out of the Army, and so he was playing his first professional ball with the Kansas City Monarchs of the Negro Leagues. And they did have him at shortstop, although Pee Wee had no way of knowing it at this point. Clyde Sukforth, the great Dodgers scout who had scouted him for Branch Rickey, had told Rickey he does not have the arm of a major league shortstop, and suggested putting him at second base when he played in Montreal the following summer, which he did. But Reese said he thought long and hard right then and there about all the guys who were coming back from the war, wanting to win back their major league jobs, all the young guys coming up, and he basically decided then and there that he didn't have any right to resent Robinson having a chance, and basically decided, if he's good enough to win a spot on our roster and help us win games, then more power to him.
Yep.
And then, so, Jackie, of course, we know, spent the summer of 1946 in Montreal, helped them win not only the International League pennant, but the Little World Series,
Yes, he did.
Against the American Association champion. And kind of ironic if you think about it, it was against Pee Wee's old minor league team and hometown team, the Louisville Colonels. So, boom, 1947, spring training arrives, and who is being, he's still in, Robinson is still Montreal property, but there's widespread talk of him coming up to the Dodgers.
Yep.
And a petition is circulated among the Dodger players and addressed to Branch Rickey, basically asking him not to bring Jackie Robinson to the Dodgers. Now, most accounts I've seen say that Pee Wee refused to sign the petition, although I found a commentary by his son Mark saying that he actually did put his name to it, but then quickly recanted. And very early on, Pee Wee became one of his staunchest supporters, and Jackie's staunchest supporters. And Peter, my voice is running out of a little bit of steam. I'd like to grab a quick drink of water, and maybe you can describe what was really one of the great moments in the careers and in the lives of Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson.
Okay, fine. Get your water. No problem.
The embrace. The great embrace.
No problem. Jackie Robinson was no longer a shortstop. Clyde Sukforth had told Branch Rickey that his arm was not a major league arm for shortstop and that he would have to play another position. And he played another position, and that was second base for Montreal. But Rickey had it all figured out that because Eddie Sankey was still a Dodger, that he was going to become a first baseman for the Dodgers. And in the spring of 1947, the Dodgers actually played some exhibition games against the Montreal Royals in Ebbets Field. And the day before opening day, or maybe 2 days before opening day, Jackie had a good day against the Dodgers for Montreal in Ebbets Field. And the announcement was made, I believe, during the ball game in the seventh or eighth inning, that Brooklyn had, in fact, signed Jackie to become a Brooklyn Dodger. And
correct.
As they say, the rest is history.
Yes, indeed.
And
it was, a pretty rough few weeks there for Jackie. Merciless razzing and insults from the other side, particularly from the Philadelphia manager, Ben Chapman.
Oh, yeah.
But it all boiled over one day in Cincinnati, which was really, I remember reading one description of Cincinnati at the time as the northernmost southern city. And very close, of course, to Pee Wee's own hometown of Louisville. And the fans were just being truly unmerciful with Jackie, raining down the torrents of abuse. And even though there's some people who want to dispute that this happened now, Pee Wee called time, walked over, threw his arm around Jackie's shoulder, offered a few words of encouragement. Neither man remembered what was said, but it absolutely stunned and, by most people's accounts, briefly silenced the crowd.
Yes.
Now, and that moment, of course, has been immortalized in a statue in front of MCU Park, the home of the Brooklyn Cyclones minor league team. Now,
Absolutely.
I am fascinated, by the, much like the revisionist history movement that seeks to absolve Walter O'Malley from responsibility for the Dodgers leaving Brooklyn, there is, to me, also a puzzling revisionist movement that seems to want to claim that moment never happened. Ken Burns, the filmmaker, he is one who says it never happened. There was another book about Robinson's first season a few years ago that made the same claim. Supposedly Rachel Robinson has said it never happened. But I go by, Pee-wee gave multiple interviews where he said it happened. He didn't particularly brag about it or think he had done anything other than stand up for a teammate, but he said it happened. Recently, I reread Jackie's last autobiography, I Never Had It Made, and in there, he says it happened. So,
yes, he did.
I'm sorry, or another one, Peter Goldenbach's wonderful book, Bums, that great oral history of the Dodgers, which came out, I think in 82 or 83. He had a long interview with Rex Barney in which Rex Barney described the incident in considerable detail. And, at least my theory, and please tell me, Peter, would you agree or disagree? At that time, the story was known, but it hadn't taken on the same, mythical or iconic status that it enjoys right now. So why would all these people conspire to describe in great detail an incident that never happened? It
doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense to me. Huh?
It doesn't make sense, does it? I've even heard, I've heard so many versions of that. I've even heard that it happened in 1948, not in 1947.
Yeah, and some say in Boston rather than in...
Right, some say in Boston, Braves Field.
Rather than in Cincinnati.
Right. I would have to go along with Jackie himself. I don't think Jackie would put that in his book if it weren't true. In fact, just the opposite. I would think he would take almost some sort of pleasure in saying that it didn't happen. Being the type of man he was, he was
fiercely honest.
He was fiercely honest. Fiercely honest.
Yep.
And for him to put that in his book,
yep,
I would say that it did happen. I would say it did. Of course, you know what? People are going to say it didn't. It did. Just like they're going to say he was out at home plate when he stole home in the first game of the 55 World Series. And they're going to say that Reese didn't point for his home run in the 32 World Series. And he did. He didn't. He was safe. He was out. Reese didn't put his arm around him. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Yes, he did, but it was in Boston, and it was a year later, and this and... you know what? We're never going to know. We're never going to know. It's sad, but we're never going to know. But I am one to I will always believe that it did happen, and I will base that on Jackie's book saying that it happened, and I'll take Jackie at his word, being the fierce truth teller that he was. He would call an ace an ace, believe me. And if it didn't happen, he would be the first one to say, that's horse pucky. That never happened.
Yep.
No one put their arm around me. No one. He had. There was no reason for him to make a story like that up. So
and I think Pee-wee was the same way. I mentioned Peter Goldenbach, and again, I think it was long after Jackie had passed away, but Pee-wee was still alive, and Peter Goldenbach wrote a children's book about Jackie, which featured the incident prominently, and Peter Goldenbach says that Pee-wee described it to him in great detail. So, again, we have the two principals saying it happened, so, I don't know why people seem to be so eager to deny it. Except some people, I think,
like you said before, like you said before, if there's a theory going around that there was a conspiracy about anything, people love to jump on that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Did we really land on the moon? Did more than 1 or 3 or 5 people kill JFK? I could go on and on and on and on.
Yep.
There's theories all over the place, and people love them. People love them. And Robert Moses was was the reason. People think 45-year-old guys are going around saying Walter O'Malley wasn't the reason. The real reason the Dodgers moved was because of this guy named Moses. And they're 48 years old. They have no clue what they're saying, but it sounds really cool. Like, hey, wait a minute. I always heard it was O'Malley. Now
I know something you old guys don't know. Yeah.
This is really a cool. This is cool. And people love to latch on to stuff like that. They love it.
Oh yeah.
For reasons I'll never understand, but they do, and they have. They do today. They will tomorrow. They will next month and next year. But for whatever, you and I don't want to prove anything tonight. All we want to do is agree. All we want to do is agree that it happened. We think it happened. Reese said it happened, and Jackie Robinson himself said it happened. So we believe it happened, and therefore we'll move on, and that's that.
Well, just one final thought on this, if I could. I've seen some people say, "Well, why aren't there any pictures? Why isn't there any film?" Well, television had not arrived to any extent in 1947. I mean, the World Series was televised on the East Coast, but and cameras. You got to remember, this wasn't the modern day when everybody's walking around with a camera in their pocket. The press photographers still carried those big old heavy speed graphics that it took a moment to frame up, more than a moment to frame up a shot. And I can just imagine more than one photographer watching it happen, kind of open mouth, and then about the moment that Pee Wee started trotting back to short, saying to himself, "Damn, I wish I'd been able to capture that."
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you mentioned up top, Captain, my Captain, and at in November when I wanted to just tease people and let them know what was coming in November, I used that quote from a poem by Walt Whitman about Abraham Lincoln because, Pee Wee Reese was indeed the captain of the boys of summer. And nowadays, I think some people think of a baseball captain as merely the guy who carries the lineup card out to home plate at the beginning of the game. But Pee Wee was so much more than that. I mean, he was the on-the-field leader of the team. He was off the field, and I think he carried that with him until the day he died. I remember reading one of the later editions of Boys of Summer, and Roger Kahn was talking about his anguish after the death of his son as a young adult, and that Pee Wee, called to offer him moral support and courage. And he said, "You remember, I was the captain, and I still am the captain, and you were part of the team, too. We're all here for you, Roger." Isn't that a kind of a almost choke-up kind of moment?
It is. The hairs on my arms just stood up. But when they would talk to Joe Black, they would talk, and today, talking to a guy like Carl Erskine, and they talk to these guys as they got older and older, and Duke Snider in his book, and Drysdale in his book, and all of these older Dodgers, they always said, make no mistake, we knew Pee Wee was our captain. Pee Wee was our captain on the field and in the clubhouse. Pee Wee was the man. Okay?
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go. I
was just going to say that leads me into another question that's come up in our groups more than once. Well, if Pee Wee was such a steady player, such a great leader in his role as captain of the Dodgers, how come he never managed the Brooklyn Dodgers? And, yeah, exactly, which he never told anybody. He
never told anyone.
Yep. It's, it's not that his name never came up. I posted a picture of a baseball magazine that said, that after on the cover there was an article teased inside, predicting that Pee Wee would be named the Dodger manager for 1951. And only if it would have happened, he probably wouldn't have brought in Branca. Well, he probably wouldn't have sat Clem Labine out of spite for 5 weeks, and there never would have been a frickin' playoff. Excuse me.
There you go.
Can we say frickin' on internet radio? Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't say fucking. You can say frickin', but not fucking.
Oh, okay. And then, of course, 1953, after Charlie Dressen got fired for having the temerity to ask for a 2-year contract, again, Pee Wee told, I believe it was Roger Kahn, that Buzzy Bavasi, the GM at the time, called him up with a very backhanded kind of offer. It was kind of like, Pee Wee, you don't really want to be manager next year, do you? And like you said, the ulcer. No, he said the strain of playing and being captain was enough. And even after he retired, the only time I could find...
Buzzy Bavasi had a very telling, pithy comment when asked why Reese never was the playing manager of the Dodgers. And he said he didn't have the stomach for it.
Yeah, literally.
And
I think
you know what?
maybe...
He never painted that picture. He just made that statement.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the stomach for it, which was true.
Yeah.
But he never explained it, and maybe he felt it wasn't his place to explain it.
That could be.
It's none of his business to explain it.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think at least one and maybe a couple of our group members, who met Pee Wee have said they asked him how come he never managed. And he gave similar answers. He did play. I remember reading somewhere that he really wanted to retire after the 1957 season, but Walter Alston, not Walter Alston, but the other Walter, the one who I usually refer to as he who shall not be named, but Walter O'Malley, convinced him to stick it out for one more season to come to Los Angeles and be a Los Angeles Dodger in 1958.
Well, O'Malley wanted all the Brooklyn Dodgers to go because he wanted He wanted to show off the Brooklyn Dodgers out in L.A.
Right, because he knew he had a team that was aging, and he wanted names. He wanted stars.
Well, they fell to 6th place.
Yeah.
In 58, and then they won it all in 59 when they came to their senses and got younger guys to fill in.
Yep. And Pee Wee was in uniform for that championship as well, but as a coach. And after that, the only time he put on the uniform was in old-timers games because through a good share of the 60s, he had an interesting career ahead as a broadcaster, paired with the one and only Dizzy Dean on the Game of the Week.
Yeah,
and
that gig was a secondary gig for Mr. Reese. Harold Pee Wee Reese had an excellent deal with Louisville Slugger.
Yep.
He was from Kentucky, and he had a marvelous how can I say it? Contract? Can I say?
Yes.
He had a marvelous contract with Louisville Slugger. And that
basically a roving goodwill ambassador, right?
Yeah. That was his major source. That was his major source of income after baseball. Many people thought it was announcing. That was a side job for him.
Right.
With Dizzy Dean.
Yeah, and just to give people, unfortunately, I was too young. I really was getting into baseball about the time Pee Wee hung up his microphone for good. But the stories about especially the team of Dizzy and Pee Wee are wonderful. And I've just got one quote of one of their exchanges that I'd love to share. And
Sure.
would you say this was pretty typical, my friend? Okay, Pee Wee speaking first. Diz, you've watched this pitcher out there for 4 innings, and he's doing a great job. What would you say he's been throwing out there? So Dizzy answers, well, Pee Wee, I have been watching him for 4 innings, and I believe that's a baseball he's throwing.
That's Dizzy.
Yeah. Old Diz.
I love it.
I really
That's funny.
think his sense of humor, as much as his brief but memorable career, is responsible for Dizzy Dean being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree. It certainly didn't hurt him. Let's put it like that.
Yep. Oh, and then I think Pee Wee got into some other business ventures. He owned a bowling alley in Louisville. I mean, what is it with ball players, and especially Dodgers, with bowling alleys? I mean, Gil Hodges, Freddie Fitzsimmons. I don't know. I guess they just saw that maybe the investment wasn't too great, and it's a steady business. I think in good times and bad, people want to go out and have a place to bowl, and
yeah, it is weird.
In any event, yep. And Pee Wee was an avid golfer in retirement or semi-retirement as well. And then, you know, if his profile had any danger of fading by the time the 1970s arrived, an old friend made sure that he and his teammates would live forever in baseball immortality. And that's one of the writers I mentioned earlier, Roger Kahn.
Yeah.
Roger Kahn covered the Dodgers for only 2 years for the New York Herald Tribune, but he grew up in Brooklyn rooting for the Dodgers. And in about 1968, he set out on a 3-year journey, crisscrossing the country, catching up with the Dodgers in middle age and the challenges they were facing as men, you know, in the full bloom of middle age. And,
Right.
you know, it's an amazing book. And if there's happens to be somebody listening to this podcast who's never read it, you have to read it. It's not optional. You have to read it, just like you have to read
it more than once. You have to read it cover to cover, and then you have to go back and pick and choose different chapters and read them over and over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, Kahn really disliked reviewers who said the book didn't have unity because to him it was all a journey coming full circle. I mean, the early section talking about his youth, then the vivid memoirs of his 2 years as the Dodger beat writer, and then about the last 2/3 of the book was revisiting the boys in their middle years. And unlike so many of them who were dealing with stresses or challenges, you know, Carl Erskine with his son with Down syndrome, Gil Hodges with the stress of trying to repeat the Mets miracle, Clem Labine with a son who had lost a leg in combat in Vietnam. Pee Wee's life was pretty good at that point, and you know, I think it remained pretty good until the 1990s, when unfortunately cancer finally caught up with him. And you know, if anybody, I would like to recommend a film that I think hasn't seen wide distribution, but it really should. Mark Reese, again, Pee Wee's son, who has become an accomplished filmmaker in his adult years, did this wonderful 4-part documentary on the Boys of Summer that aired on HBO.
Yeah.
But the DVD release, which I purchased, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it included an unaired 5th chapter called The Boys in Winter, which I think especially for the man's own son to make was extremely, you know, I just don't know how emotionally he was able to do it, but he did. You know, and it juxtaposes 2 stories. There's a very happy, hopeful, upbeat story, you know, Carl and Betty Erskine and Jimmy, and basically showing how Jimmy was thriving as a member of their family, despite all the naysayers who said he could never live at home, he could never have a job, he could never have a satisfying life, and in fact, Jimmy Erskine has done all those things. The other part of the film was a very up-close, personal, no-holds-barred story of his father's battle with cancer. And, you know, you saw him with the initial diagnosis and dealing with the initial debilitation and not being too happy about it. And then, as so often happens with cancer, you know, it responded to initial treatment. There he is one day back out on the golf course joking with all his old buddies, and the cancer stays in remission for a while, but ultimately it comes back. And, you know, in 1999, at age 81, Pee Wee joined the other boys this summer who had gone before him, and Mark was filming him and talking to him about his feelings until I think just a couple of days before he died.
Now,
and
this DVD is for our listening audience. This DVD can be purchased?
Yes, the box set is available on Amazon. I'm not sure where else it's available, but I'm trying to remember. I should pull up real quick what the name of the original series was. But it was, you know, as I said, 4 parts that aired on HBO, and then the 5th part never was broadcast. But it's really well done. I will pull that up here for you. The magic of the internet. Yeah, okay. Brooklyn Dodgers, the original America's Team, which was aired in 2005. You know, a Mark Reese production. And, as somebody who never met Pee Wee Reese, but certainly admired him, loved him from afar, it was kind of devastating to watch, frankly, but, you know, we all go through it with our loved ones, and someday we'll all face that journey ourselves. And I think maybe Mark wanted to show his father facing that battle with as much courage and determination as he could muster. And, and he did that right up until the end.
Right. Wow.
So.
Once again, what's the name of it?
The Brooklyn Dodgers, the original America's Team. And and it wasn't HBO, it was ESPN that aired it. And so the sleeve has the famous picture of Ebbets Field up front. You know, there you are about to enter the rotunda. The Brooklyn Dodgers, the original America's Team by Mark Reese. And of course, being Mark Reese, he was able to get access to every living Dodger at the time, not only his father, of course, but Duke and Campy and Carl Erskine and Shotgun Shuba. You know, I'm pretty sure every major living Dodger of the time was in there.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, just watching, I don't know, those guys were all pretty used to being interviewed lots of times, but the fact that they were talking to the son of a teammate, or in one case their own son, that it really opened up. It's a well done, insightful package, and I highly recommend it. Not only for guys like you who lived through that glory, but the ones who, like me, who are just a little too young and really want to immerse yourselves in it as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great.
Okay. So, in 1984, Pee Wee finally got his due, I think, which was long overdue, but at least it happened, and it happened during his lifetime, and he was voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And, and well-deserved. Well-deserved, I think. And I posted on our group page his acceptance speech, which was, I think you'd agree, class personified.
Sure was.
And, for the rest of his life, he was very proud of being a Hall of Famer.
As well he should have been.
Yep.
Well,
I was looking again. I just pulled up again, but the Society for American Baseball Research, which is the premier baseball history organization in the country, and they have a biography project aiming to put biographies online of every man who ever put on a major league uniform. I myself contributed Billy Cox's biography, and I'm now working on one about Shotgun Chuba. But the Pee Wee bio begins with a detailed description of what happened that day at Crosley Field in May of 1947.
All right.
So it does say according to legend, but it does, it also...
Well, they're going to have
so
to...
I'm going to say, yeah.
I can understand them saying it that way, yeah.
Sure, because there is dispute, although, again, we've agreed there's really no grounds for the dispute, except
exactly
for people wanting to puncture legends and rewrite history. But, it happens.
It does.
Well...
Too often.
Well, yeah.
Well,
I think we've covered Pee Wee from cradle to grave, and then yet I'm sure we've only scratched the surface of this great Dodger and great man.
Yeah, he was a great Dodger and a great man, and he was our captain, and he was the heart and soul of the Brooklyn Dodgers, the boys of summer. And I don't think there's anybody my age that was born in Brooklyn and was a Brooklyn Dodger fan that will ever can forget Pee Wee Reese and all that name brings to mind. It's just, he was just a great guy and a great ball player and a Hall of Famer. And it's great that we can get together and we can talk about these fellows, because without them, we'd have a gigantic hole in our lives, I'll tell you that. We wouldn't have the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Indeed.
And that takes up a lot of space in my life, and happily so. And I want to thank you for coming on again, my show, and another great job, another Brooklyn Dodger. Keep up the good work on Facebook, because
thank you, my friend.
You still have 3.5 more weeks to go with
I
Harold.
Don't feel like I'm going to run out of material. Yep.
You're never going to run out of material.
No.
And you're never going to run out of photographs.
Nope.
Never happen. Never.
How about if my last thought, you were talking about what Pee Wee meant to Brooklyn, but I love this quote, Pee Wee talking about what Brooklyn meant to him.
Great, go ahead.
He said, and now notice, he says city, not borough. Yeah. He says city. Right. He says, Brooklyn was the most wonderful city a man could play in, and the fans there were the most loyal there were.
Wow.
So talk about love reciprocated.
Yes, love reciprocated, exactly.
It's an amazing
That's what
thing.
It is and was, yep. Yeah, Pee Wee Reese.
All right,
thank
Peter,
you.
my
Bill
friend.
Hall. Bill Hall, thank you so much for coming on the air, and thank you so much for telling us all about Pee Wee Reese. And we will see all of your Facebook postings in the next 3.5 weeks about Mr. Reese. And have a good night, sir.
You too.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.